Hi, everyone. Welcome to Fireside Creators. I am your host, Reverend Dr. Sherry Pallas. This is the 21st show. We can drink now, like we didn't before, right? If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe. If you're watching on Facebook, register with StreamYard so we can see your name. Otherwise, you'll be anonymous, which is okay if you want it that way. I want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Amanda, Kirsten, Michelle, and Ruth. Thank you so very much. You guys keep the show and enable it to go on. If you enjoy the show and would like to support it and me, you can go to sherrypallas.com and use the support tab. There are several options and levels of backing. For your generosity, I try to give you cool stuff like the VIP experience, where you can chat directly with the panel, my most awesome wristbands, shout outs, and even one-on-one time with me. For just the cost of a cup of coffee, you could support the show each month. Thank you in advance. Okay, enough of our housekeeping. Let's bring on our panel. First, we have, let's see here. I feel like I'm out of practice. First, we have Mike Zenker. Mike became a pastor in 1990 and has been the senior pastor of Hope Fellowship Community Church in Waterloo, Ontario since December of 2003. He launched Growing in Grace Ministries Canada in 2006, which is a teaching ministry focused on identity in Christ and understanding forgiveness. Mike's life has been a journey of unlearning religion and discovering a greater grace. He serves as a fire department, long-term care, and funeral home chaplain, providing hope, love, and light to those enduring in hard times. Welcome, Mike. How are you today?
Doing well. How are you?
Thanks so much for joining us.
This is going to be fun.
Yeah, hopefully, right?
Oh, yeah.
Next, we have, oh God, my technical skills are struggling today. Next, we have Reverend Michelle Sevacko, PhD. She is a retired but continues to serve by sharing reflections, music, meditations, spiritual counseling, and with a more open-hearted, open-minded, inclusive individuals, groups, churches, and centers. She also facilitates rhythm drum circles. Reverend Michelle focuses on new thought, teachings and practices, universal principles, celebrating everyone as individualized expressions of the one, and honoring all loving paths and people. She identifies as a new thought, practical, positive Christian, coming from a very diverse background with its pluralistic approach in spirituality. Welcome, Michelle. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me.
I'm so glad you're here.
I am glad to be here.
And definitely not least, we have Ana Garcia Lucas, who was born and raised in New Mexico. She is a mother, wife, and veteran. Anna earned her MDiv at the Episcopal Divinity School at Bexley Seabury Seminary. A Reformed Roman Catholic, she is now an Episcopalian, spiritual mystic, probably a heretic, and a lover of coffee, music, green chili, and good jokes. Welcome, Anna. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you. I appreciate you inviting me.
Oh, I'm so glad you guys are all here. So, I have some questions. Welcome to Sherry's counseling session. Every day, we see memes in the media about forgiveness, and they have raised what I believe are some contradictions that I have seen in my own life. I have always been a very forgiving person. There are countless instances of this. My ex-husband and my mom are good examples. As I look back, I understand that I had to forgive these people because not forgiving them meant losing them. My love and need for them to remain in my life superseded anything that they did to me. It was a huge insecurity and, in my opinion, a classic trauma response. As I've healed and grown to love myself, my tolerance for such dismissal or abuse has ceased. When I was insecure and needing forgiveness, seemingly or when I was insecure and needy, forgiveness seemingly came easy. Now, without rectifying their behavior and a sincere apology, I'm done. I now have boundaries that loving myself requires. In some cases, I've forgiven them, but I now refuse to allow them in my life to hurt me again. So a healed me can only offer conditional forgiveness, whereas the broken me offered it unconditionally. I don't think either extreme is healthy, unifying, or good examples of forgiveness. So I guess my first question is, how do we love ourselves and forgive those who don't act loving towards us? Because isn't it supposed to be forgive and forget? Isn't that the true forgiveness? I love it. Everybody's shaking their heads. Okay, Mike, you first.
Good grief. I think the church has lied.
No, really?
Absolutely. They've blown it. They've guilted and shamed everyone into horrific relationships by telling them they must forgive, otherwise God won't forgive them. And there's no room for emotions. And what does reinstatement look like? And forgiveness is not the same thing as reconciliation at all. And so I think what you said earlier, I think you can forgive unconditionally, but that does not mean the same thing as reconciliation. So I think you can totally forgive somebody. And then, mind you, I see it in two parts. I see it as an event and a process. So I'll explain later.
Well, and forgiving doesn't mean that you're either condoning what a person has done or said, or saying this is okay. Forgiving just, to me, means that you're no longer tethered to them. You don't have that energy that's connecting the two of you. That makes you feel bad, less than, or whatever. And simply that, it's really hard to put into words. Because so much of it is just a feeling, I think, more than the words. And it's a matter of being willing to forgive. And it's not a one and done thing. Like Mike mentioned, it's a process. There might be somebody that, calls you a name and you say, okay, I forgive him. And I would think, yeah, I'll forgive you, just don't do it again. But it's not something that's, really hurtful for decades or whatever. But I found in my own forgiving processes and the bigger things, and sometimes things that weren't as big, it's like peeling off layers, that stuff will come up for you kind of at the level that you can handle it. And then once you've gone through that part of it, there's this thing where you're kind of like, okay, I did that, I'm done. And then the next thing you know, something else comes up. And it's just a continuation of the process. For me, I know that I'm done when I can bring whatever it is up and I don't feel any emotion attached to it at all. I can still say, I know that this person is also a child of God and we're connected at the cores of our being. And that's kind of just how I look at it.
Anna? Hi.
Hi. So happy trauma. Happy trauma.
Right?
I was, trigger warning. So I was raped as a child at 7 years old. And it continued, and my mother knew about it. So when you talk about forgiveness that is ingrained, boom, that's it. And as Mike said, as a good Catholic kid, you have to forgive, because look what happened to Jesus, and he forgave, and don't you want to be like Jesus? It hurt me worse than the initial trauma, because that put it all on me to carry over and over, not just what happened to me, but it literally defined who I was, because I had to do something. As Dr. Reverend Michelle, how would you like me to address you?
Michelle.
As Michelle mentioned, as Michelle mentioned, it put the process on me when I was not healed. So it's almost as if you're walking on a compound fracture on both your legs.
Yeah.
You cannot do it. And it makes any journey you're taking, any relationship you're in, any day that you're trying to get through, horrible. So for me, I didn't understand any of that until I went to seminary and dug it all up, dug everything that happened up. And it was like going to a doctor who said, you know what? All those bones, they're healed, but you've got scars all over, your bones are crooked, and you cannot walk in a way that makes you feel good until we cut you open, re-break the bones, and we go through the rehabilitation process. And I think that's important, as both Mike and Michelle said. It is a rehabilitation first of your own love for yourself. And once you can recognize that you're not an evil person for forgiving somebody who hurt you in any way, because one hurt is not comparative to another. They are all singular hurts, and they all can compound and accumulate and grow heavier and heavier. For me, it was the admittance that I am not well. I cannot walk. And that's not my fault. It is not my fault for not being able to walk. It is an acknowledgement of, am I ready to go be ripped open and have all those bones broken again? Because you have to be ready. Do I have a support system for this? Because that can screw you up if you rip all that open and you don't have a quote unquote medical team there to help you rehab. And finally, somebody good to thunk you on the back of the head saying, you're going to start and you're going to stop and you're going to go backwards and you're going to go forwards and you're going to go in little loops, and that's okay. Your journey on this is not anybody else's. And I don't know that it ever ends, at least not for me. I think it is a constant, as Mike said, anybody who tells you to forget, that's BS. I don't know if we can cuss on this, but that's BS.
It's adults only here.
In Canada,
you've been on the show before.
We say, in Canada, we call it male bovine excrement.
I don't know if I could get all that out. It is not true. And to hold you to something that is uninformative and can be solely performative is ridiculous.
Well, and I also think that includes the part where you have to forgive yourself for allowing it to happen too, right? Your part in it. And that, I think, especially when I have forgiven someone and then they have repeated what I needed to forgive them for, then it's like a self-hatred type thing that I need to forgive myself for. So there are all these layers. And I think it's convoluted when someone says that you must forget, because I mean, that's one thing that I struggle with. If I can forgive and get over the pain and the anger, and I too, Michelle, like you said, I know that I'm there when I stop crying over it, when I stop feeling angry, when all of those things. But forgetting it, it's like saying that the bone was never broken.
Yeah, and when you're a child like Anna was when she went through that, there's nothing she could have done as a little child like that would have prevented it, or she wasn't at a point in her life where she had any boundaries that she could say, wait a minute.
So where are the boundaries? How can you forgive? I mean, I always think of the saying that forgiveness is like poison in a drink and you drinking it and expecting them to die. So I know it's very self-serving. But when I think of forgiveness, true forgiveness, I think of two instances. One, There's actually many cases where, say, a murderer meets the victim's parents, and the parents have forgiven this person so much that they could have dialogue. Or another one that always stands out is the Amish, when they had that school shooter who killed all of those children, and the Amish went and took care of the murderer's widow. I mean, that is spiritual forgiveness that I aim for, but I don't know that I'm capable in some instances.
So
I can't help but wonder if, well, when I read about things like that, I'm like, okay, but are you doing it because you have to do it, or are you doing it because you're really feeling that in your heart? Because there are people that'll go through the motions of doing things because that's what expected of them, because that's what their belief system demands of them, or their church, or whatever. But if you really could peer into their hearts and their souls, it would be like,
Fake it till you make it, maybe?
Yeah.
I think you touched on something there that the definition needs to be clarified. I texted you earlier today in our chat that I think before we get into the how to forgive, I think that's one of the later stages. And I even think forgiving yourself is one of the later stages. But to define what is forgiveness leads you to what it is not. And that's the one I love the best, because it really is like a bazooka to all these fake theories. But to define what it is, there's a number of definitions out there, and I've done a lot of research from different teachers and leaders and how they phrased what is forgiveness. I don't have the list in front of me; it's too big. But to realize it's not one, it's not a definition from a dictionary or from the Bible. It doesn't exist in there. But to see the tapestry, the art being put together for what forgiveness is from many different perspectives, you begin to see it is definitely something that moves from inside, from the light that's in you, that draws you and pushes you towards forgiveness. But then it also shows you what it really is after pushing past everything it is not.
Yes. I think that forgiveness, not being able to forgive, keeps you from fully loving, and not just one person, just fully loving, recognizing the ability to fully love and fully live. So as Mike said, it begins inside. Tell me what hurts. What is it that hurts? And dig into that. The tapestry you were talking about, start pulling those threads, because until you find what it is that hurts, then you begin that,
you have to admit it.
I need? Yes, this hurts and this sucks and I hate it and this is what it did to me. And it informed the rest of my whatever, that if anything felt like this again, it was bad. So tell me what hurts. And that's what doctors do, right? Where does it hurt?
That's the only way to really heal. Anything else is just going to be slapping a Band-Aid on it. Unless you get to the core of what the issue or issues are.
I saw this one quote. It says, forgiveness doesn't excuse their behavior. Forgiveness prevents their behavior from destroying your heart. That was one that I came across. That was really good.
Well, and I took a course on forgiveness a couple months ago, and one of the greatest takeaways for me was, the old saying, you can change the way you look at things, and things that change you can change, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So instead of saying, I can't believe they hurt me this way, if you switched it up and said, I can't believe they're hurting so badly to have done this or to have acted this way, it again removes the victim stance of the pain and I can't believe they're doing this to me and the whys, and puts it back on them, the whole hurt people analogy, and says, something in them is hurting to have done that in the first place. And switching it off of the victim mentality for me enabled me to forgive. Again, it's a process, because I get angry again and I get hurt again. And I just remember, they were doing this out of their own pain as opposed to putting it on me. And that's something that helped me.
And that's normal. And I think that's what I was never told in the church, that it's normal. It was as Michelle said, one and done. That's what it's supposed to be. Because if you believed in God and you loved God and you had faith, you forgave and that was it. Walking while broken means you're going to stumble, you're going to trip, you're going to fall, you're going to re-injure either majorly or smallly when something else happens similar to what hurt you in the first place. So it is okay to have to go back and rehab, go through that process again.
But do that
Are
with
we ever
somebody
told
safe.
that?
Yeah, we need to do it with somebody safe, though.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like, and unfortunately, sorry if there's pastors listening, sometimes they're the worst counselors. They just are.
Yeah.
They're not trained to deal
No.
with psychological development and hurts. I'm sorry, they're just
You
not.
need a trauma-informed counselor.
You need somebody that's trained in it, whether they're
Mhm.
Christian or not. It has nothing to do whether they're Christian or not. And I think, do they have the skills? Then go get some help. It took me 3 counselors before I finally found the counselor I needed to speak to, because by the time I had my first session with her, it was like all the other sessions with all the other people were like, she did everything in one session that all the other guys tried to do. And then I was in for 3 years of weekly therapy. It was intense. I got a question for Anna there. When you were wrestling with your journey, did the words shame and guilt become second language for you?
Oh, heck yeah. Because as a Hispanic female, as somebody who's taught that you are subservient to men, as somebody who's taught that your sacrifice should be a good thing because that gets you out of hell quicker or whatever. All of the little girl confusion that I felt, the pain because it was painful, the inability to articulate what I felt, anger at my mother for leaving me, it was her boyfriend, for leaving me with this person and not being able to say that because, again, the Bible says you obey your mother and your father, so you can't really get angry at your mother. So there was all of this beating up, all of this hurt, and nowhere to put it except stuff it inside of me.
Yeah.
And it was at seminary as we were going through, I believe it was called our river walk, as we visited certain aspects of our life that marked huge things for us, that it broke open. And we were in a very safe place. We were in a very loving atmosphere. We could stop if it became too much. And we could revisit the same thing however many times we needed to. And I still struggle with it. Certain movies, certain books, certain words will re-trigger it. And I'll feel that anger, that fear of men, that fear of being left alone because we hid behind locked doors. I was the oldest. I had 3 younger sisters, and we would hide behind the locked door of the bedroom while he was trying to come in. Wow. So there is this exponential trauma that has defined any bad things that happened to me because I wasn't taught to deal with those emotions. I wasn't taught how to let those emotions inform.
You were too young.
Right. And I think even as adults, we're taught, turn those feelings off. You feel too much. You're weak. You're a pansy. God gave us these emotions to help us make good decisions.
Well, and I was told that not forgiving them made that equal to their crime. You know, that you were worse than them if you didn't forgive and let it go and be silent and, you know, and all of those things. So if you want to be the good person, you have to forgive your abuser. And, you know, and a lot of times that meant still being in relationships with them, still being in their present. Yeah. I mean, you know, I was thinking about this show, and that's why I came up with the opening question. I was like, this is something that I've struggled with, you know, as an abused child myself, going through all of these things. And I've only known it to be total forgiveness, which means an acceptance back into your life and into your world, or not. And not until I started loving myself, which, like I said, there's the irony in that, right? I mean, I hated myself. I didn't love myself. So I forgave everybody. Do whatever you want to me. Shit on me all you want. And I'll come over tomorrow with a cake. To loving myself and going, no, I won't put up with that anymore. I won't.
To me, the biggest misunderstanding when you talk about what forgiveness is not, it is not saying what you did was okay. I want you to be part of my life again, or you can be part of my life again. If I love you, people will be like, well, that's not very loving,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I'm sorry, I have to love them from a distance. You don't have to be a part of somebody's drama. None of that is forgiveness.
Well, and that's what I say now. I won't go back to my abuser. I won't. I will try to forgive for me and for my own sanity and for my own will to live and all of those things that come into play with it. But at this point, no one has ever loved me as much as I love myself. And that's what's going to have to carry me through. Don't you agree as the same type of thing?
Yes. I think people forget that forgiveness is for them.
Yes.
It's not for the other person.
No.
It just isn't. It's for your own healing process.
Yeah.
And if it happens to spill over to be something positive for them, that's nice. But forgiveness is between you and your Heavenly Father. And then that can turn into something, but it may not, right? So it doesn't automatically mean you have to re-enter into relationships. For me, I've got a list of 18 things forgiveness is not. And
okay, what are they? Well, give us some of them.
Well, number 18 is forgiveness is not restoration. It does not mean the same thing. Forgiveness is not minimizing the hurt. It's not the absence of pain or hurts. Forgiveness is not easy. Forgiveness is not about time, as in time heals all things. Ha ha. Yeah, right. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's not a feeling. It's not ignoring it, justifying, excusing, or explaining away the offense. It's not waiting for the other person to repent. Wow, they haven't said I'm sorry yet, so I'm not going to forgive them. That weird lie. I don't know where that even came from. Forgiveness is not a quick fix. Forgiveness, and this is where, Sherry, you kind of allude to this. Forgiveness is not telling the offender you forgive them. The words, right? It's not about the words, because forgiveness comes from the heart, not from what we say. Even praying for them, dear God, forgive them. That's not the same as you forgiving them. It's completely different. Telling the other person that you've been hurt, that's not forgiveness. Turning the other cheek is not forgiveness. Besides, you have 4. And then have forgiveness is not just a one-time event. It is an event, but it's also not a one-time. You may have to forgive that person 100 times in one day. And within a week, you're down to maybe 90 a day. Yeah. It can be a long, long process.
Well, and that leads me to my next question. How do we forgive when there is still pain?
Well, that's the myth. Just because we still feel pain doesn't mean we haven't forgiven. People assume that, well, I still feel angry towards them, therefore I must not have forgiven. No. To me, what I've discovered, the best thing is forgiveness is an event that happens. It's a one-time event between you and your Heavenly Father. I forgive them, but man, I'm pissed off still. I am hurt. I don't know how to handle this, but I choose to forgive. Now, will you help me with this process? And it's taken years for some people. So it's not a quick thing.
Let me throw another thing in there. What about for the atheists who don't have a relationship or belief in any God? Wouldn't something apply the same to them?
Yep. Same thing.
It's love. It's the understanding that if I keep all of this crap inside me, my stomach hurts. My stomach hurts and I become grumpy and horrible, and I either need to throw it up or I need to push it out another side. But it needs to come out in order for me to rest and feel better.
Yeah, forgiveness is not a Christian thing.
No, it isn't.
No.
It isn't. It is putting the oxygen mask of love on your own face so that you can inhale it back in and recognize what you need so you can go out and be who you want to be to anybody else. Anybody you see down the street, and not be somebody that you're gonna punch people in the face because it triggers something. it's your own oxygen mask of love for yourself. You're absolutely right. It's got nothing to do with anybody else other than recognizing this is what caused the hurt. And this is what I need to learn from this event so that I don't repeat it, so I don't go back and do it. So I recognize that if something looks familiar about it, and I know how to vocalize, hey, are you going to rape me? I need to know. I need to know what your intentions are. I need to be very specific in what you are intending with me. That's an example. So I know how to react, act, etc., or get the hell out, one or the other.
And I think that really speaks to the idea of forgive and forget. I'm a no on the forget. You want to remember. You want to take that lesson, whatever the lesson or lessons were, with you, so that if there's something like it that comes up again, that you remember and you're able to deal with it.
Well, people use the Bible and say, well, God forgets. And I say, wait a minute, where does it say that? It does not say that God forgets, as in he's a senile old man. That's not true.
Rooting at that.
The idea of remembering, you've heard that line, he remembers our sin no more. One of the best definitions of the word remember has to do with a broken arm, let's say. How many have broken a finger or an arm? You put a cast on. That's the process of healing. It's not supposed to stay on there forever. But then let's say you've cut off a finger. What do? You've just dismembered a finger. All right. But you go to the hospital and gets remembered. Okay. God will not remember our stuff anymore. He's not going to attach it to us anymore. He's not going to hold it against us. It's only pure love, love, love. And that's the part we forget. The most angry people are the ones who probably are wrestling with forgiveness the most. Angry, toxic. I think forgiveness is the worst part of it all.
That's what I thought of when Anna was talking, was it really boils down to bitter or better, right? Without forgiveness, you tend to be bitter and angry and all of that. And then with forgiveness and learning to heal and all of that, you become better. You learn the lessons. I used to tell my son, there's no mistakes if you learn. If you learn from things, you're going to be able to heal other things, heal yourself, and do all that. And I think that we see the bitterness in society from a lack of forgiveness.
Absolutely.
And to the point of forgetting, that bone will always show to be broken in the x-ray. It will always be there. You may not see it, but there will always be a residue of that break.
And it is always, you have the tendency and the possibility of re-breaking it because it isn't as solid as it was to begin with. So give yourself a little bit of grace in that area, and let whoever you're in a relationship with, friend, coworker, etc., know this is where, when you speak of these things, when you mention these things to a significant other, when this happens, this is what could happen. This is what my reaction may be and why. And I need you to understand that too.
I again, using the break analogy, I have broken my foot, my left foot, every bone in it, at least once. And when the weather gets rough, when I sit on it wrong, I wake up, I sit up and I limp for a little bit again. So when that pain is triggered, we are going to have that limp. We are going to have that struggle to say, okay, I'm seeing this again. I'm feeling this pain again, but to keep going. Because I think that with forgiveness and it not being a daily thing to practice, we revert back to the bitterness. We go back to the anger. We go back to the pain. We go back to the victimhood of saying, why me? Why did this happen? But if we move forward and try to do those types of things, then I don't know, hypothetically, because again, I still work on this, is going to happen.
If you're saying you're still working on it, like you just said, you took a course, right, on forgiveness. Yeah. How long, how many sessions were the courses and how long? Roughly, I'm getting to
it was an online course. I think there were 8 sessions and they were about an hour and a half each.
That's great stuff. And it was probably great content, but it took 8 hours, not a 20-minute YouTube video.
Yeah.
Right? Like this world of fast information coming at us, people want quick fixes. But when you've had pain traumatized to you and at you and in you and on you for so long, for years, like for your sexual abuse as a child, that was for those periods of years. I had a mom who was horrifically abusive, physically abusive, who made the priest who sexually abused me for 3 years look like the good guy.
Oh, wow.
You just put this all together, and how can you unpack all those years in a 20-minute video or an 8-hour course on forgiveness? This is not a quick journey. And I think people need to recognize that and begin to realize, wait a minute, if I'm going to do this is going to take time. I need someone to do it with me too. Right?
Yeah.
Healing's never quick, though.
Pardon?
Healing's never quick. I mean, you break a finger, you're down for 6 weeks.
But this is like a podcast, so people are looking for quick info.
Yeah.
And it just happens. It's the trait of our culture, and I just want people to know it is not quick. There's work and investment involved of not just learning, unlearning, a lot of unlearning. So,
well,
but
and the
there's hope.
deeper the pain, the longer it's going to take too.
Yeah.
One of my minister mentors about close to 25 years ago had told me that in the morning she asked herself 2 questions, and that was, how was she to serve and who was she to forgive that day? And she also told me that often the person to forgive is herself. Mentioned how Jesus had made peace with your adversary quickly. And she had found that for her adversary was often her. And what happened, because she'd had a lot of trauma as she was growing up, but she blamed herself for everything. And so she finally got to the point where she realized, no, it wasn't me, it was them. But in a lot of cases, she had allowed it. And so she needed to go through years and years. And I think she probably did that to the day that she died. And it was something that really stuck with me. Every morning, I've added one thing to it. It's, who should I serve? How should I serve? And who should I forgive? And that's my 3 daily starters. And I can't imagine that not being a part. It's like so ingrained after this many years now. But it really makes me think about, what is it that I have on my mind, in my heart? Because I know if I'm carrying around something, it's going to affect me on some level. It'll either show up physically with something that's going on and I won't feel well, or I'll get sick, or I'll get real snappy with somebody, or it's going to have some kind of something
physically affecting you.
Yeah.
Yep. There's enough
For me, it's my
evidence to
stomach,
show.
like Anna.
Sorry.
For me, it's my stomach, like Anna.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't that such a beautiful way to reacquaint yourself on a daily basis with yourself? And that I think that also, I think you said it, Mike, or maybe Sherry, everybody is saying such good things, is understanding who you are, where you came from, where you're at, where you want to be, and doing this daily, developing that relationship with yourself. I think you said it, Sherry, loving yourself so much that you want to know who you are. And for those of us who are Christian, that is recognizing the divine image within you and reacquainting that loving spirit within you and saying, hey, who are you? Or like you said, what do you want to do? Let me examine, let me open up this delightful closet and see what's in here for me to wear today and how I want to wear it. And how do I want to bling? Do I want to blend? Do I want to belong? How do I want to see myself in love and with love and to love? And if we don't know ourselves, we can't even begin to forgive.
Well, people think they're terrible people. I'm no good. I'm going to the garden to eat worms and they're chewy. You name it. The shame, the guilt, the false guilt is just plaguing to the soul. And when you discover who you are, that you are one with the divine, it's like, I'm one with the force is one with me. I love that. Like this is God in being all in all. Christ holds all things together, everything. That's where my lens comes in. But to see that we know who we are, you're getting at that, Anna. This is our identity. We got to know our identity. Everybody's acting out of a false identity, and hence they're having a lot of struggles. So when you've had a lot of pain inflicted, you've had messaging sent to you of false identity. And if you believe those voices, you believe it, and that is your new identity. So to unlearn all that and find out you're actually a good person, you're full of light and love. Oh my goodness. Right there's a traumatic thing to work through.
Well, and I think I just had an aha moment. I think it was far easier to forget than it was to forgive. I could bury everything. I could not think of it. And then we could be copacetic. The relationship could continue, whether that be a friendship or a lover or a family member. If all I needed to do was forget that it happened, and then everything would be fine. And again, that transfers into physical pain, anguish, anger, depression, all of those things. And then when it comes to the point where you actually have to do the work to forgive, that's when it gets really difficult. I never looked at forgetting as it being like a scapegoat for, the easy way out until tonight. So thank you guys for that.
I think that's where substance abuse comes in.
Yes.
The substance is shopping, eating, drinking, smoking, regardless of what it is. That's how people forget and bury those things.
And why do they do it? Explain why. Because there's a one phrase that's critically important. If we can understand this, when I heard this, I was free from something. Why does that happen? What is it they're trying to prevent by doing those things?
It prevents you from getting hurt again.
Not quite. Go deeper.
Feeling.
Yes.
The pain.
You're avoiding feeling.
Yeah.
Like I remember when I was in my counseling, my drinking went up like exponentially, and I became more agitated at home. It was not nice for my family so much, but I also didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't understand or have a language for the stuff I was facing. And so fine, it's just easier not to, and when my therapist explained it was a vice, not an addiction, it was a vice, my go-to to avoid having to face and feel. My goodness. In fact, the best part was she sent me a picture of an emotions chart. If you haven't seen this, you got to look it up. It's the wheel of tons of feelings. And then in the closer you get to the center are the more key feelings and emotions. I didn't have words for half of these emotions. I'm a guy, I'm trying, I don't know, I feel bad, I'm angry. But she made me look deeper. And suddenly I was able to then face those things and articulate what's going on inside me. So that part could heal. Next thing.
And don't fake it until you can make it.
No.
I cannot stand that. I can't stand when people say, well, just fake it till you make it. Well, you're doing the same thing. You're trying to mask something that hurts. And if you can become too good at that. You can become too good at faking to where you no longer know who you are.
Well, the thing that I find funny in quotes about that is that I hear that more from the same people that say they want you to be authentic.
Yeah.
And
I got to inject funny haha. Funny how? Funny haha. Sorry.
Well, even that forgetting part is it could be, listen, it could be your soul protecting you because you aren't ready to deal with it yet. Yeah. It wasn't until I was 45 years old and I saw an article hit the Toronto Star, New York Times of how the Catholic Church was scooting out priests, hiding them, getting so they couldn't get charged. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking, that's my story. The movie Spotlight is my story, except it's in Canada. And so the idea of being triggered at age 45, I didn't know this, but sexually abused men, between 45 and 60 is when most of that stuff reawakens. I didn't have a clue. And when the not only my lawyer, but the therapist started to walk through all these things that's been going on in my life, that's a typical symptom of that abuse. Like I'm sure, Anna, you from your past, there's a list of proven patterns look, and now we even see that in other people around us and go, yeah, I think they've been abused. Like there's some obvious telltales. So the forgetting might be a way of self-protection, and you need to know that. That means get help. I didn't mean that for you, Sherry.
Hey, I own it. So that brings me to my next question. What are your favorite techniques for forgiving others? Mike, I'll let you start.
The block button. No.
Mute.
I think for me, the technique begins with really wrestling and studying through what forgiveness is not. It really is. I didn't know how ingrained I was in churchianity. In fact, the first time I called the police department to tell my story, I told them I'm fine. I've forgiven, because the Bible says to forgive. And I played all those phrases as a 19-year-old kid. And they said, oh, you sound fine. You should still report this. So I did. But to use the line, I had no idea what I was dealing with. In fact, my mother's situation, that we don't have time for this story, but I had a situation 2 years ago where God showed me yet another layer of forgiveness that came to me that I did not initiate. And it was a beautiful story. So you just may not be done. There's more.
So a technique?
Get some professional help. There's a list.
That's a solid technique.
It is a technique. Don't avoid it. Don't think I'll be strong. I don't have to see a therapist. Yeah, you do. Yeah. That's what they're there for. You go to the doctor for an ouchie on your arm and your belly. Go to a therapist who deals with the ouchies up here. Why is it so shameful to go?
The American way of not dealing, or I can't even say American because you're Canadian, but the way of separating our head from our bodies, it drives me crazy. Anna, do you have any?
Yes, and this only came to light recently. As you know, our son, 9 years old, the adopted son, was recently diagnosed with DMDD, and it is a type of disorder that makes him violent and rage-filled, and the words that come out of this 9-year-old's mouth is horrific. His violence is pointed towards me. So in the days, which is maybe 3 to 5 days out of the week, that I become the punching bag, both verbally and physically, I am taken back to my mother, to an abusive ex, to all of that. And I also am still his mother. And so dealing with he doesn't know what he's doing, he can't help himself to, I really hate being a freaking punching bag every single day. And how do I hug him when he wants a hug right after he's bitten me and made me bleed? So forgiving is being able to be honest and saying, I understand you're better right now. I'm not. So I need time to cool down. And I took a pot of boiling water and I showed it to him. And I said, turn off, because you can't touch it, right? And he said, no, I don't want to touch it. And I said, okay, I want you to take the thermometer and put it in there, and we'll start timing to where it cools down. Of course, it took about an hour or so. And I said, do you think you can touch it now? And he looked at the thermometer and he said, I think so. And I said, do you want to try? And he said, you try first because I'm scared. And so I did, and then he did, and he says, it's still kind of hot. And I said, honey, that is what my feelings are like. After you go through what you feel, that is what I am like. And so being able to be honest with what I'm going through,
That's
even
beautiful.
though that is a taboo for a mom to not want to hug her child, a child in need, a child who has a mental health disorder, it's not his fault, et cetera, who looks like a little wimp. I need to be honest because I need to show my other kids and my husband and myself that it is okay for me to say, I love you and I don't like you right now. I need time to come to that. I will come to you and I will hug you. And it's usually maybe a day or two later. I am able to tell him, I will always be polite to you and I will be respectful, even when you're not. And I need time. So the forgiveness is a daily thing because it opens up and re-breaks those bones that have been broken decades, 40 years ago, 20 years ago, over and over with somebody that I can't move away from, I can't separate myself from, I don't want to separate myself from, who needs me to stay close. And I need to be in the right frame of mind in order to do that as well. So it's honesty. It is pure, naked, flung open. These are every single scar I have. God, let me throw this on the altar and tell you this is some fucked up shit. God, please, this is all I have to offer. Please just take it.
Oh, I wish I could hug you right now.
Some days it doesn't. But it is a daily journey.
So you're learning to
vulnerability.
you're learning to speak to his identity and keep his behavior separate from the identity, right? Because that's a big thing parents mess up all the time. So you're a bad boy. I got that a lot. But they're mixing identity and behavior. You can't do that. And you're describing exactly that separation in a very beautiful way.
Yes.
It wasn't immediate, I will say that.
Your vulnerability is something to be admired. Michelle, don't tell me to write sentences again. I reached out to Michelle a couple years ago on this subject, and my punishment as a child, because I went to a Christian school, was either spankings or writing sentences. So
yes. Terrible.
When I reached out to her and said, "How this is killing me. How do I get through this?" And she said, "Write sentences." And I'm like, trauma all over again. Is that what you're going to tell me?
Did you ever do that exercise?
No, I couldn't. I should have, because I should have honored you in the time that you gave me to offer that advice. But there's too much involved with the sentence writing from my childhood. I couldn't do it. I couldn't.
Well, it remains one of my go-tos.
I know.
In doing spiritual counseling, it is one of the things that I suggest. It's not for everybody, because the people that consider themselves recovering Catholics, especially that went to parochial school, have, big histories of writing the sentences like you had talked about. And, but for me, it is a good exercise, getting my energy, putting that energy behind it and just saying, I forgive whatever the person's name is. And I do that 70 times a day for 7 days. And, but the most impactful thing for me was participating in a group about close to 35 years ago that was called Your Inner Child of the Past. That was based on a book by Hugh Missildine. And what it did would take you back to your childhood, but not looking as much at you as whoever the person or people were that had done harm, and look at their lives and what their childhoods had been like. And it was the first time that I had given any thought to, like, well, why would she have done this? Or why would he have done this? What was going on with them? And not only was it helpful for me for the forgiving, even though, like I said, there's that was 35 years ago, there's still a couple people that I'm working on that pop up here and there. So it is an ongoing thing. But it taught me to do that with basically anybody that was in my life, that I felt like had been hurtful to me. And I was like, okay, well, what's going on with them? And fortunately, I had a good lesson from Chuck one time in that, where I was ranting at him about something, and he just stood there and he said, I know that's not what the problem is. What is really the problem? And I think that was my first inkling. We had been together like maybe 7, 8 years at that point. That was my first inkling of using that information on other people and being like, okay, this isn't really what's going on with you. What is going on? And if I do that with somebody that I feel like has hurt my feelings, fortunately, I haven't had any, like big issues to deal with in the last few decades. But it's very helpful when I look at what's going on in their life now, what was going on in their life 10 years ago, 20 years ago, how did they grow up? It does help be able to look at it and have a little better understanding of where they're coming from and what's behind them doing or saying the things that they're doing or saying.
Well, I think it's easier to forgive when you have empathy, right? Instead of just painting the picture with a black brush saying it's just an asshole, let's just cross this whole thing out. If you have empathy, especially when you love someone impeccably like a child, and when it's easier to have that empathy to say there must be something wrong. But
separating the person from what they say and what they do is another thing.
That's a tough one.
What they're doing and what they're saying isn't necessarily who that person is. That came up a real lot with Trump, where people would, be talking about him and stuff. And I would say, I understand. I don't like what he's saying. I don't like what he's doing, but I still recognize that, like it or not, at the core of his being, we're still connected because we're all created by the one. We are all part of the one. And
it's a tough one to swallow.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that if I saw him in person, I wouldn't want to smack the shit out of him.
Okay, there we go. Back to reality.
I love him. I love him.
Yeah,
but that's true. You wonder, he must have had a horrible childhood to be who he is now, and how many people didn't love him, how many people abused him in one way or another to get him to that point. That's what I had to do with my abuser and every subsequent abuser and everybody who hurts me. To, like you said, Michelle, there is a backstory, Anna. There is always a backstory. There is a backstory to what everybody does. You may not get that backstory, but you need to understand there is a backstory. And for somebody to be such an angry, such a conniving, such a lying,
everything bad,
everything, my God, what had happened to them? And what did they pass on to theirs?
It will see, and that's the struggle, though, is working from a point of empathy versus anger versus judgment. All of those things, when we work in the empathy, it is easy to do those things, especially for people we love. People like Trump is so much harder. And I always say this proves we're human. But I mean, that type of forgiveness might be beyond me.
Can I point out something?
At least with Trump, because I don't even like him.
You didn't know that.
Yeah.
I want to highlight something Michelle just said, that if you guys didn't catch it, and if the listeners didn't catch this, the way you so easily said that without a batting your eyelash, this is what forgiveness. If we become forgiving people, that's the goal, that we reflect the light that's in us. And so when we see everyone else the same way, through the same lens of oneness, which is what Jesus said. We're not supposed to see each other after the flesh anymore, or those behaviors. We don't identify everybody based on their behaviors, which is really hard to do when you got creepy people all around you. But either way, the point is, she easily just said, this is what it looks like. And so to realize there's hope, that we can arrive at a place where we become loving, where we're not going to be as offended. And I think offended people, same thing. So it's the exact same thing as anger, same thing as just being toxic. It's the same thing. There's some releasing of forgiveness that has to happen from that. That was beautiful, Michelle.
Thank you.
It was beautiful the entire hour, and we are at the top. What a show. I've never seen, 21st show, but I have never seen our comment section so quiet. So I don't know if everybody's completely resonating with this, or they're dumbfounded, or what it is. But I'm going to give you 2 seconds to enter your questions as we close out the top of the show before we head into the VIP. Mike, final words, and where can everybody find you?
Oh, man, there's hope. And again, I'm the only guy in this circle, but listen, men are abused too. Men have hurts and traumas, and there is a way to experience true forgiveness, not only for yourself, which is important, but to be able to offer forgiveness. And it doesn't have to look as religious as you think. There's hope. So.
Thank you. Anna?
There is a margin of grace in all things. And that margin of grace in authentic revelation, and this is from Eric Law's Kaleidoscope, the holy currencies, but it doesn't have to be religious-based. Authentic revelation, be transparent in who you are, even understanding that could mean getting hurt. Listen with compassion, as Michelle said. Everybody is a person, and there's always a backstory. And understand, you don't have to be up close. You can love somebody from a distance. You don't have to see them. You don't have to talk to them. You don't have to tell them. You do the love that you can do until you can do better.
Thank you. I see him popping in. That's great. Michelle, any final words, and where can everybody find you?
I think basically just bottom line is be authentic on every level. Be authentic with your feelings, with what you're saying, what you're communicating, what you're putting out to other people, and mostly with yourself. Allow yourself to feel the feelings. And if you have areas that are in pain and are hurting, do what you need to do to get to the core of those so that real healing can take place.
I love it all. Thank you so much for being here, you guys. I'm going to sign you off until we get to the VIP. Thank you so much. I think it was a wonderful conversation. Any last words? Oh, we have a comment. Hold on. Make sure. I agree. Thank you for sharing your stories and all of this. It was absolutely beautiful. I'll see you guys backstage.
Thank you, Cherry.
Thank you. Okay. What an amazing show, right? Let's see here. Thank you so much to our wonderful panel. As always, I learned so much. I think I do these shows a little bit selfishly, but I hope that you guys learned something too. Next week's show is on rape culture. We must highlight the issues in order to stop them. So that's why I'm tackling tough topics. If you're a VIP member, we will see you over in the VIP in just a few minutes. The link to join the show is posted in the group. Thanks to all of you and all of your support. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you next Tuesday. With love.